Hey everybody, Scoutcrafter here again. Mishmash Monday. I hope you had a nice weekend. I hope it was everything you wanted it to be. And you know what's funny? Not to start off with a little bit of a rant, more of an observation, but have you noticed that there seems to be a certain segment of society that does not want to return to work? And there are people out there, like I saw a guy on the news the other day. He had a barber shop and he's like, look, I got to open up, man. I got, I can't go on like this. I got to make a living for my family. I'm not going to go through all my savings just to avoid. And there are people going, no, can't do it. Because there are people, I guess like our politicians, they get paid by the year, So long as they stay out, they could stay out for months and months at a time. It don't hurt them. They get the same paycheck, right? But for those poor guys that are out there and working week to week and month to month, and they don't care if you can wear a mask or whatever. They just don't want you doing it because we're gonna lock it down. Anyway, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Anyway, got a couple good things to talk about today. First off, we're going to talk about the tarnishing factor. Now, if you remember last week, we did these 3 beautiful pliers, and a good friend of the show by the name of Chuck Sorelli, he asked me, he said, what about the tarnishing factor? Do you put anything? Does it get tarnished? That's a good question. A lot of people ask that. And it's true, because this is raw steel, more or less. And again, they did come this way from the factory. They were polished steel or whatever. And that's why a lot of them are rusted now, because they really had no chrome plating or anything back then. So here's an answer to your question, Chuck. And this here was my great-grandfather's Kreuters. And you can see here, now these were black, they were, patinaed out. And I remember I used these since I'm a kid. So I think it was last year, I said, you know what, I'm just going to do these because, and I didn't do an over-the-top job because I use these at least 2 or 3 times a week. I use these pliers. I use them all the time. And they were abused when I was a kid, but they were, they're sentimental value. So I did these up, and this is the tarnish after 1 year. Hardly anything, right? And like I said, I use these a couple times a week, and it don't really show any tarnish or anything. And if it did, you can always take a little carnauba wax, that wax cleaner, and it'll take off anything. But you might have a little bit coming up there. You see that, a little darkening there? But that's about it, So that's an answer to your question. These do hold up as long as you don't leave them outside and in the elements, they do hold up. Next up, longtime friend of the show, him as Trader Joe, but his name is Joe. He's Charlie's owner, Charlie the Wonder Dog, the most awesome dog. Well, Joe was asking, he says, do you ever have this problem with corrosion building up on terminals of the electronics? And believe me, I did. And I thought we'd address that real quick because I've been dealing with this for years, and maybe some of you have too. So let's go check it out. Now, first off, let's start off. This is the picture that Joe sent me, showing me one of the his electronic device that you could see the corrosion that comes out of the batteries. That's very typical. And here are some electronics that they're notorious for getting corrosion on. You get them in these Walkmans or radios, things that you don't use that often. Look at this old flip. Remember this? The old flip cameras? These were actually very well made, and they were nice. And it was nice because all you had to do is pull this out, and there was your USB. You plugged it right in and downloaded your file into your computer. And yeah, these were pretty interesting because they were super simple, which was good for me. Anyway, let me open up these and show you what we're dealing with the backs. Okay, here we go. We got everything taken apart. Let me show you now. When you're dealing with the backs of battery terminals, you have 2 types. You have a spring type like this. You could see that's a typical spring that pushes down, and then you have a paddle type. You can see here that's like a flat paddle. These are preferable. Okay, these paddle type are preferable. The problem is that they're all zinc plated, all these the hardware, and that zinc is a conductor, and it's whenever you get some battery leakage like we have here, it's going to go right to the steel, the zinc covered steel. Now, it'd be great if it was made from brass or something, but the reason they don't make it from brass is because you can't temper brass to give it a spring effect. So it has to be something that can be tempered. And it's always been a weak point. It's been that way for 50 years since electronics started. They knew that this was a problem. Why didn't they change it? Well, because when you have a problem with this, you don't blame the device, you blame the battery, and then you buy another device. You know, it's ingenious. But here's what we're dealing with here. Now, the springs are the worst, you know, the springs. And you know as well as I do, the mini mag lights are notorious because they're sealed and they're notorious for building up corrosion. But here's one that, like I said, I haven't had open for a long time. You can see the corrosion starting to build up right there. You see that? That's built up corrosion. It's just starting to leak. It's not too bad. But again, the paddle is the preferred way. If it's a spring, it's in. But I'll show you what you could do now. First thing you're going to need, and everybody should have in their shop, is Q-tips. You know, just get an old ice cream container, but you fill it up with some Q-tips. This is actually from the dollar store Q-tips. They're not the real Q-tips, but they're very good. They're stiff. They don't, these are excellent. So what you want to do is you want to, now that if you read any, if you go online and you look it up, they tell you take some vinegar or lemon juice and wipe out down the terminals and then make a paste of baking soda and water and mix it up and put it on, and that will neutralize the acid, which is great for like a car battery terminal. But I'll tell you what I found that works really good, and I've been using it for years, and that's hydrogen peroxide. I don't know why this stuff works so good, but I started using it. I first use a little hydrogen peroxide, and then after I wipe off the corrosion, I wipe it down with a little WD-40, or what I like is 336. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's wipe off this terminal using a Q-tip and some hydrogen peroxide and see how clean we can get it. Okay, we wiped down the terminal. You can see that all the dirt and grime that comes up, that hydrogen peroxide really works good. It works good in your ears too, by the way. Anyway, so there we go. We cleaned it off. Now, you're always going to have a little bit of scarring, and scarring comes because it's almost like a corrosion. So to get rid of the scarring, and again, I prefer the paddle type, but you can do the same thing if you had the spring type too. You would just wipe it along the spring and like that and do the same thing. So this works on all terminals. Now, to get rid of the scarring or the little bit of corrosion that you have here, we use what's called a pencil eraser. Now, a lot of Marines out there are laughing because we used to have to do this with our radios, our Prick 77s. We had to take them into the field, and you had to always get the terminals nice and shiny brass before, so you didn't want to get caught, you know, with a bad connection out in the field. So anyway, you take this, your pencil eraser like this, and you just rub it back and forth here, and that actually is like an abrasive and will clean the terminal. So you do that for a little while. Okay, after you hit it with the eraser, it should be nice and clean and free of all corrosion and nice and smooth, and you'll feel like it's silky smooth with the eraser. Then what I like to do is you can take WD-40, but what I like to use is 336. This is a CRC product. It's a corrosion inhibitor and lubricant. It's very much like WD-40, but it has a little bit more oil in it. I like this, and I'll tell you why I like it, because they used to throw half-used cans away when I was working, and I used to grab all the half-used cans, and that's why I have like a lifetime supply now. So anyway, 336, put a little bit on the Q-tip, and just wipe it over here. Or WD-40, like I said, just wipe down your terminal like this, and same thing, just go over the other terminals while you're here, and that's it. And then with the dry side, just make sure there's no excess. And that's it, you're done. Now, if you find you have a device that it keeps happening over and over again, even though you clean it, they just keep coming back, what you might want to do is you might want to try coating it with a little bit of a dielectric grease. And this is a conductive type lubricant that you just take a little bit here, again, on the Q-tip, just a very little bit, goes a long way. And then what you do, again, this is something you don't usually have around the house, but then you would wipe after you clean it, you would wipe the terminals and stuff, and this would help protect it, especially when you have an incident where you have recurring incidents where it keeps coming back. But that's a good thing to have. Dielectric grease, conductive grease. You don't see it too often, but pick some. You know, I think I use more Q-tips in the shop than I do in upstairs in the bathroom or for my ears. Maybe I should use more for my ears, right? Okay, next up, we got a review of a product. A lot of newcomers to the hobby are looking to pick up a buffer, and they keep it, you know, I can't tell you how many times people say, what kind of buffer should I get? And, you know, we all any old timer in the business, we have tons of motors around, so we adapt the motor to our uses. But I'm going to show you what you should do if you don't have any access to any motors, or you don't want to go out and find one and adapt one. A turnkey motor. Let's look. You know what? So I was just cleaning up here, getting ready to show you the buffer. I was thinking about, I said that I wanted something turnkey, you know, it's turnkey. And I said, man, there's probably a lot of new people that don't know what turnkey means. It's an old expression. And basically what it meant, turnkey meant that it was ready to go. Like if you were buying a car, there was no, oh, it needs this, it needs that. You just turn the key and go. And that's like a new car, turnkey. And that's like, when I get my next house, I want it turnkey. I don't want to do anything. And so sometimes that, you know, especially the older you get, the more those two words are music to the ears. Turnkey. And here it is. I got me a Powertec. You could thank Joe's Shop. Joe's Shop has put this through the paces. Now, I don't know if they're made the same way. This is a model BF600. It is it's a very popular model. And you can see here it's 3,450 RPM, a little fast. Again, good for buffing. I'm using it for the fiber wheels. That's why I wanted it. And I wanted it because it was enclosed. A lot of my motors are open. And once you use them fiber wheels, it creates a lot of dust, gets in there. Let's open it up and see what this baby does. Okay, the first thing I like to do is I just want to know how much this weighs. So I have my trusty scale over here hooked up, and I'm just going to weigh this unit, and it comes in at 16.5 pounds. So it's very lightweight. It has a nice rubber base under here. See, it's got a rubbery base, but 16.5 pounds is very easy to move around for me. Okay, here's the unit here. We have it. Now, another thing I like about this particular one is it has this, you could bolt it down here with the two bolt holes, or it's got this big lip around it that you can clamp, and that's how I always mount my motors, is that I take a clamp here and I always clamp it down. This way I don't have to leave it in one area. So I like that feature. But we're not going to clamp it yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on, check the vibration. That's the first thing you do. If this thing's, when I turn this on, if this thing starts to walk across the table, we're going to have problems. Okay, very smooth, very nice. You do this before you put the wheels on, just to make sure. No, it runs nice and smooth. Very good. Well, let's put the wheels on and check the torque. Now it says it draws 4 amps, which is the same as my tried and true buffer over there. It says 4 amp draw. So let's see what this does as far as torque. Now to put your accessory onto the buffer, it comes with some hardware, and this is a spacer. And if you notice, this has a step down shaft, which is good. This is a 1/2 inch shaft here, which is very common for a lot of items you buy. It has a 1/2 inch shaft, but then it steps up to about 9/16 over here. So the thicker the shaft is that comes out of this motor, the better it is. It's more stable. So you put the spacer on first, followed by, you see these two type of washers there, cupped washers. You put one cupped washer on, followed by a buffing wheel or whatever your accessory that you're going to use, a fiber wheel. Place the other one on, and then you spin on the nut. Now, one thing to notice is the nut on the other side is a left-handed thread, so it don't spin off. And then what you do is you just give it a tighten down with just gently with an adjustable wrench, and we're good to go. Then we'll check if it torques. Okay, we have the two wheels mounted that came with it. One is a stiff or firm wheel. You can see here it has extra stitching through the side. This one here is what's known as a loose wheel, and that's good for fine polishing and to give you a really good lustrous shine. We're going to turn it on now. We have it clamped down, and you can see it's running nice and smooth. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this wheel here, and I'm going to take a wrench that doesn't need anything, but I want to see if I could slow the wheel down and stall it. Okay, you can see here, this one's already polished. Now I find the unit has ample torque. It's not nowhere near as going to be like a Baldor, but it's very good for me, especially what I'm going to be using it for. Now let's talk a minute about wheel diameter. This says here that it's meant for a 6-inch, see it says buffing, 6-inch buffer, meaning 6-inch wheels. And the reason they say that is because if you put the bigger the wheel, that you put on here, the faster the surface RPM is to the whatever tool you're using. So the smaller the wheel, the slower the RPM. So because this is so fast, I'm going to try and use 4-inch wheels or something smaller on this unit. And I save my bigger wheels for the units that have a lot of torque or something. But you have to be careful because you overheat the tools real quick. And even now, we were just doing that a little bit, and this already warmed up the wrench. So if you wanted to put like a wire wheel on here, you get a 4-inch or a 5-inch wire wheel, you'll be fine because it's a smaller wheel. You don't want to put like an 8-inch wire wheel on here. It'll be spinning too fast. Well, in closing, I can't believe how fast that 15 minutes went, for me anyway. So, thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you have a nice day. Take care now. Bye-bye. So let me get this straight. You don't think there's nothing suspicious about what's going on with this whole Corona thing? You don't think it's suspicious that they first started off saying that it started with somebody eating bat soup from a bat that was not even sold in that market? That don't bother you? You don't think anything suspicious about this whole not going back to work? Nothing bothers you about this, huh? You're okay with all this? You don't think there's nothing strange, huh? Well, I'll tell you, better than me then, because I got my doubts.